Hi everybody, today is January 5th, 2014. I did an article similar to this about a year ago, how the ATF uses rogue tactics and storefront stings across the nation. At that time, more oversight was promised to be done, but evidently not. Aaron Key wasn't sure he wanted a tattoo on his neck, especially one of a giant squid smoking a joint. But the guys running Squid's Smoke Shop in Portland, Oregon, convinced him it would be a perfect way to promote their store. They would even pay him and a friend $150 apiece if they agreed to turn their bodies into walking billboards. Key, who was mentally disabled, was swayed. He and his friend, Marquis Glover, liked squids. It was their hangout. The 19-year-old spent many afternoons playing Xbox and chatting with the owner, Squid, and the store clerks. So they took the money and got the ink etched on their necks, tentacles creeping down to their collarbones. It would be months before the young men learned that the whole thing was a setup. The guys running Squids were actually undercover ATF agents conducting a sting to get guns away from criminals and drugs off the street. The tattoos had been sponsored by the U.S. government. Advertisement for a fake storefront. The teens found out as they were arrested and booked into jail. Earlier this year, when the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel exposed a blotched ATF sting in Milwaukee, that included agents hiring a brain-damaged man to promote an undercover storefront, and then arrested him for his work. ATF officials told Congress the failed Milwaukee operation and was an isolated case of inadequate supervision. It wasn't. The Journal-Sentinel reviewed thousands of pages of court records, police reports, and other documents, and interviewed dozens of people involved in 6 ATF operations nationwide that were publicly praised by the ATF in recent years for nabbing violent criminals and making cities safer. Agents with the U.S. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosive employed rogue tactics similar to those used in Milwaukee in every operation, from Portland, Oregon to Pensacola, Florida. Among the findings, ATF agents befriended mentally disabled people to drum up business and later arrested them in at least 4 cities, in addition to Milwaukee. In Wichita, Kansas, ATF agents referred to a man with a low IQ as slow-headed, before deciding to secretly use him as a key cog in their sting. And agents in Albuquerque, New Mexico, gave a brain-damaged drug addict with little knowledge of weapons a tutorial on machine guns, hoping he could find them one. Agents in several cities opened undercover gun and drug buying operations in safe zones near churches and schools, allowed juveniles to come in and play video games and teens to smoke marijuana, and provide alcohol to underage youths. In Portland, attorneys for 3 teens who were charged said a female agent dressed provocatively flirted with the boys and encouraged them to bring drugs and weapons to the store to sell. As they did in Milwaukee, agents in other cities offered sky-high prices for guns, leading suspects to buy firearms at other stores and turn around and sell them to undercover agents for a quick profit. In other stings, agents ran fake pawn shops and regularly bought stolen items such as electronics and bikes, no questions asked, spurring burglaries and theft. In Atlanta, agents bought guns that had been stolen just hours earlier, several ripped off from a police car. Agents damaged buildings they rented for their operations, tearing out walls and rewiring electricity, then stuck landlords with the repair bills. A property owner in Portland said agents removed a parking lot spotlight, damaging her new $30,000 roof, and caused leaks just before they shut down the operation and disappeared without a way for her to contact them. Agents pressed suspects for specific firearms that could fetch tougher penalties in court. They allowed felons to walk out of the store armed with guns. In Wichita, agents suggested a felon take a shotgun, saw it off and bring it back, and provided instructions on how to do it. The sawed-off gun allowed them to charge the men with a more serious crime. In Pensacola, the ATF hired a felon to run its pawn shop. The move widened the pool of potential targets, boosting arrest numbers. Even those trying to sell guns illegally could be charged if they knowingly sold to a felon. The ATF's pawn shop partner was later convicted of pointing a loaded gun at someone outside a bar, instead of a stiff sentence typically handed down to repeat offenders in federal court. He got 6 months in jail, and a pat on the back from the prosecutor. To say this is just a few people, a few bad apples, I don't buy it, said David Harris, a professor at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law and an expert on law enforcement tactics and regulation. I also did a report where they're giving out free drugs. I believe it was, Minneapolis, so that law enforcement officials could pass their drug identification classes. If your agency is in good shape with policing, training, supervision, and accountability, the bad apples will not be able to take things to this level. The ATF refused the Journal Sentinel's request for an interview with Director B. Todd Jones or other agency officials to address findings of the investigation. Instead, the agency provided a written statement that failed to answer any questions. A spokesman, Ginger Colburn, suggested reporters read ATF news release issued after the stings. In an email, Colburn wrote that the ATF, the primary agency entrusted with enforcing the nation's gun laws, use storefront stings to target violent criminals. Long-term undercover investigations are one of the many tools used by the ATF in locations that have high levels of violence occurring in the demographic, and a mechanism is needed to rid the area of a large volume of individuals as opposed to a handful of individuals, she wrote. It's impossible to know the scope of the problems within the $1.2 billion agency. The agency won't say how many undercover storefronts it operates every year or disclose their locations. Agency officials don't publicize all of the busts. Court records in many districts are sealed by judges or otherwise unavailable to the public. If an operation is flawed, as in Milwaukee, there may be no publicity at all. Concerns about planning and oversight of undercover operations date to at least the 1990s, when the ATF was part of the Treasury Department. Discussions were held by top officials not only from Treasury, but from the Department of Justice and others, in hopes to bring ATF investigations in line with other federal agency standards. It was a source of frustration for everybody, said Roy Little, a former longtime federal prosecutor, who participated in the meetings. Nearly 20 years later, many of the same problems exist. But because much of the agency's work is done secretly, the public hasn't known. The problems with storefront stings surfaced publicly earlier this year when the Journal Sentinel followed up on a tip from a Milwaukee landlord that the ATF had damaged his building and left behind sensitive documents revealing details about undercover agents and their operations. I did an article about this one here. The newspaper investigation found the operation, dubbed Fearless Distributing, was marred by far more than the landlord knew. A machine gun and other weapons had been stolen from an agent's car. The storefront was burglarized. Agents arrested the wrong people and hired the brain-damaged man, who had an IQ of 54, to set up gun and drug deals. The machine gun has never been recovered. Members of Congress from both parties demanded answers, sparking an internal investigation by the ATF and a review by the Department of Justice Office of the Inspector General. 8 months later, the ATF has not released its findings, and the Justice Department investigation is not complete. In a briefing with congressional staffers, ATF officials acknowledged the failures in Milwaukee, but indicated they were isolated incidents. At the same time, agency officials admitted they had no written procedures, policies, or guidelines for running such undercover operations. They promised to create a written policy. For years, agents have been setting up everything from phony pawn shops and tattoo parlors to recording studios and thrift stores with no official protocol. It's no surprise that, with few rules and oversight, stings have gone astray, said veteran ATF agent, who asked that his name not be published because he is not authorized to speak on the issue and feared retribution. Many of the problems stem from poor management in the field division, coupled with pressure on agents to make cases and prove their worth, he said. Unfortunately, when it comes to reporting to Congress for budget reasons, the numbers are all that count, the agent said. It is hard to define in a meaningful way to Congress that arresting one person with a long criminal history of 15 felonies is better than arresting 15 people with one felony each. The way it works. The storefronts generally sell items such as hip-hop clothing and shoes, cigarettes, and drug paraphernalia. The ATF agents offer their goods at steep discounts, hoping to generate traffic. Cigarettes might sell for $2 below retail. $100 jeans might go for $10. When it comes to pawn shops, agents might buy just about anything, paying top dollar, and welcome stolen items. No matter the type of store, they wire the place with high-resolution cameras and build secret closets with recording equipment. Growing scraggly beards and speaking street lingo, agents work to build trust among potential targets, spreading the word they are looking to buy guns and drugs. They print up their flyers and pump neighbors for leads. And then they make deals, dishing out cash for pistols and shotguns, heroin and ecstasy, sometimes repeatedly from the same customers. After several months, sometimes a year, they shut down and bust those who came in and conducted illegal business. They tally up the weapons seized and tout the number of defendants. The more the better, displaying guns and drugs before local TV camera and print journalists showcasing their work. With defendants caught on camera, the cases typically lead to guilty pleas and swift convictions. Seldom do their cases go to trial. I think a new tactic that they're doing is forcing businesses in certain areas to hire undercover police officers as employees. What they do is they give these new undercover police officers hours, and then they cut the hours of the original regular employees so that these police officers have more opportunity to investigate the crimes that they are investigating. That's just what I have seen going on lately, is businesses being forced to hire new young undercover police officers fresh out of the academy, and they're eager to make a name for themselves. They don't care about the employees that they take hours away. They're more interested in being in a position to investigate whatever. There is enough crime out there. Why do you have to manufacture it? Said Jeff Griffith, a lawyer for the defendant in Wichita. You are really creating crime, which then you are prosecuting. You wonder whether the moral high ground is in this. To be sure, the operations have led to hundreds of convictions and long prison sentences for offenders, some with violent records. In Albuquerque, for example, a man who was twice indicted on first-degree murder charges, once for killing a man in prison and later busted in a storefront sting for being a felon in possession of a weapon. But in many cases, examined by the Journal Sentinel, the people charged in the string had minor criminal histories or non-violent convictions such as burglary or drug possession. In several of those cases, defendants still got stiff sentences, but others resulted in little or no punishment. In Wichita, nearly a third of the roughly 50 federal cases charged led to no prison time. Defendants got probation or had their cases dismissed, records showed. One was actually acquitted by a jury. And I'll give you a link if you want to read more. It'll be down below in the Show More box or at the bottom of this video for who to give credits to. Alright, bookmark my site. I'll keep you up to date. Please stay safe, and I'll talk to you later. God bless you. Bye.